Hey everyone, this is Rochelle Rizzi with Vrai. I'm here today with Sir Steven Wilkinson, my great friend and mentor, a wonderful colleague I met about a decade ago through the Small Giants community. And I wanted to bring him here today because as we continue to go through this worldwide event, I know that he can give us some great insight as entrepreneurs on how we can work on our business. So welcome, Sir Steven.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. Great to be with you.
Thank you.
And what a great initiative, if I may say so.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm really excited to be able to bring some wonderful entrepreneurs to the table to help other entrepreneurs through this time, because there's just so many questions that people have and fears and uncertainty. And I want to be able to bring people resources and hope during this time. So I know that you've been working on some really amazing projects with your company, Good and Prosper. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I will. I'll roll it up backwards.
Okay.
I published a book, or an ebook, for the first time last week, collecting ideas, 7 ideas of what entrepreneurs and business owners could do in this time, called Leadership in the Time of COVID-19. And I was prompted to do that because in the week prior, ever since the outbreak of the serious part of this economic and health crisis, there has been just this tidal wave of outpouring of wisdom by business leaders from all over the world, giving advice and orientation and reaching out to the business community, their own, a global one, anonymously, personally. And I found myself just forwarding stuff like one of those tennis ball machines that just keeps shooting balls out. And I just found that I didn't have time to comment on all of the good stuff that was going across my desk and across my Twitter feed and across my emails and my Feedlies and all the other areas that I get information and inspiration from. So I decided to condense the best stuff that I had up until that point, and it's by no means exclusive, and it's by no means a definitive list. I decided just to pack them together with some text of my own as a contribution, and I've enjoyed that enormously. So I am writing a lot. I'm thinking a lot about business, about small business, about the challenges that they're going through within the context of this, but also in the broader context of what's happening in the economy, what's happening beforehand, what this is likely to do to that trajectory, and thinking a little bit about what might be the outcome coming on the other side of this. And I say thinking a little bit because at the moment, it feels as though I'm sitting in the middle of a kaleidoscope. And I don't know whether you remember those toys that we had as children, where you looked into a tube and you would twist it slightly. And as you twisted it, the patterns and colors and shapes would change, sometimes dramatically. You would just make one little move and suddenly it will go into a completely different pattern. Well, the world outside feels a lot like that at the moment. If you're in the kaleidoscope, in other words, if you're in an industry or a business that is constantly being subject to massive change from day to day, then that's not a really good place to be. I feel extremely fortunate that I'm in a position where I'm more observing than being whiplashed. And because we don't know what the final pattern is going to be, and because very small movements can change the pattern dramatically, this is not a time for thinking too hard about, the whole range of possible outcomes. We need to be very vigilant, I think, and just see what door we come out of when this passes, which undoubtedly it will.
That's an
So that
amazing.
doesn't tell me very much about my business, and my background is as an investment professional, investing in small and medium-sized businesses. I spent the last, 15 to 18 years attached to the restructuring world, being involved in buying businesses outright that are in some sort of need of restructuring, trouble, or even in bankruptcy. In the small business arena, no particular industry focus, and attempting to fix them with management and leadership skills. So all the business knowledge I have is from 30 years of investing as a business thinking professional, and then being in business as an investment thinking professional. So I have both of those skill sets in my trajectory.
Yeah, you do have an amazing background. And even in the last 10 years that I've known you, to see how you've evolved both personally and professionally to begin Good and Prosper. Really, it's the first business that you've started, correct?
No, I've started lots, but they've tended to be specific to one investment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Of which I was circus director. I would set up a company with the aim of buying a business, and there'd be a few investors in there, and we'd be management, and so it would be very much on a case by case basis. I've done next to no venture investing. I'm not very good at that. I would call myself an angel of death rather than anything else when it comes to ventures of startup businesses. But this is the first business that I've set up, the Good and Prosper, where I say this is actually about me rather
Mm-hmm.
than about a target or an investment proposal. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I am loving being I don't know, what would you call it, startup investor at a fairly late stage, because it's up to me now to build an audience and to see if what I have to say about business, and I think this is the key point, my particular perspective, whether that is useful to an entrepreneurial audience, and whether my perspective and the context that I think I can bring, whether that helps and is in service or not, because that's the only reason for any business being in existence, is to serve customers. And I'm still exploring who I might be for my thinking and writing, basically.
Well, and I keep coming back to that analogy of the kaleidoscope and thinking about how you can really talk to that with what you do. We both really strongly believe in creating a vision for ourselves and our businesses, and the power of that. And the kaleidoscope analogy, and yes, I do remember those, and I loved them because I loved to create the different colors and patterns, and the unlimited number of, I mean, it's infinite, the number of options and results you get from that. But I tie that into the artist in you, because you're a poet and you have always been this amazing writer and speaker, philosopher. Talk a little bit about the recent conversation we had about how poetry was a thread to numbers in your business.
Yep. So how long did you say this is going to be? This is a 4-hour video, is that right?
The pithy version. We can always do parts 2
no. Well, I think I seem to remember that the conversation went around my own path, because I started off life from a very, very, very early age, reading and being fascinated by stories and particularly lyric. And, you know, I have photographs that my mother has kept of me sitting on a potty with a great pile of books. And on one of the photographs, you can see that I'm actually reading a picture storybook of the Arthurian legends. So I have proof that from the age of about 4 onwards or 3, I was already diving deep into literature and doing a lot of reading on the loo. And there are some things, you know, that never change. And poetry, literature has always been my passion, something that I feel strongly about. I love my language. I love the workmanship of language. But I ended up in finance. I'm not going to say serendipitously, because I did it to spite all the people who said that in my family that there were many careers that I could choose and I'm sure would be successful in. And finance was probably the one that I was least suited to and that had least room for me. And that was spur enough to say, all right, well, then that's the path I'm going to take, which will give you a little bit of an idea about my own pig-headedness. But at the age of 23 or whenever it was, I went to Munich to work for an American company who were offering a trainee program, and I ended up in their program, and I had to stick the course for 2 years, and I did. And at some stage, having left that bank but moved to an investment management company, I had to make a choice when faced with evidence of my own incompetence, of to either change my attitude towards numbers and the whole métier that I'd landed in, or indeed go and look for another job. And I had one incident where I was pulled up by the senior partner of the business that I'd been hired at, and I know he'd taken a large risk on me, and I was upbraided in no uncertain terms for my crappy and unprofessional presentation of numbers. And I realized while he was talking that numbers had their own grammar and structure and syntax, and that they needed respecting in exactly the same way that I always insisted on respect for language. And we've had this conversation over the years about, because I know that you're fascinated by and have a love for language and the respectful treatment of language. So I realized on that evening, as I was having strips of skin pulled off me, that actually numbers are like language, and they tell a story. And you just have to be able to read the language in order to listen to the story or to uncover the story. And that discovery of mine, of reframing the whole idea of what numbers are, completely changed my view of them, because they are always telling a story. And as the story unfolds, every day businesses produce numbers, markets produce numbers. They are telling you the story of that particular area, whatever it is, of that company, of that market, of that, and that was transformative for me, because I now I treat numbers and the world of numbers as I treat a language. There are some languages that I'm fluent in, and others that I have only a smattering of knowledge in. Numbers happens now to be one of the languages that I'm fluent in.
And how would you describe I guess, do you feel the urgency to dig into numbers, or is it vision, or what do you think people are really needing right now during this time? What advice would you give them to focus on first if they're feeling panicked? Or, part of me doing this series was I started initially thinking about the hospitality world, because so many of my previous clients and I had an event venue. I mean, I'm just so entrenched in that world, and I see how they've all had to shut down. So many people have lost jobs. We've lost our places to be entertained and to gather with friends, and it just feels like such a loss to me as a foodie. And I think about them and what they must be feeling right now.
Okay, well then the only thing, I mean, it's a disaster for so many industries. It's a disaster. Um, and if you just look at the stock market and see which industries have sold off most, it's all the ones that you've just mentioned: hospitality, restaurants, hotels, cruises, conference managers, event. I mean, everything that has to do with people gathering together to do stuff. You
Right.
know,
The airline industry.
airlines, everybody. The car industry is falling off a cliff, and so every single individual case of distress is harrowing, horrible, and in my mind, probably unnecessary, but it's happened. So there's absolutely no way of skirting around that issue. It is for individuals caught in those industries, and there are millions of them. It is a deeply distressing time. And governments around the world are trying to do what they can to mitigate that. So I think the very, very, very first thing that anybody needs to do who is caught in a position in where their revenue has effectively gone to zero is to accept deep within them that this has absolutely nothing to do with them, their competence, their ability as business owners. This is an act of, I'm going to call it an act of God, because they can do nothing about it. So that's as the starting point. The next step is to look at what help is being offered. You know, what do I need? If my business has gone to zero, then my costs need to go to zero too, because there is only one purpose in business for any single expense, and that is to support revenue. So if my revenue has gone to zero, then my expenses by definition need to go to zero. And that means talking to every single person involved in your business, and whether it's a long-term supplier or one of the partners, your landlord or whatever, and coming to some sort of arrangement. And everybody's doing that at the same time. So eventually, if everybody's doing it, revenue will just go to zero, because if nobody's producing anything and nobody's allowed to do anything and everybody's staying at home, then in those affected areas, you're talking about zero revenue and zero costs. It's that simple. So understanding that we are in an unprecedented situation. I mean, we've never had anything like this before, a mandated shutdown of large areas of the economy. And it is because governments have insisted on this, then government programs are the only answer to mitigating the disastrous result, because people need to do things. You know? And you're asking the question, what do people do on an individual basis? It is to replace that life-supporting income in the only way that's possible at the moment. You know, there isn't a business in the world, not one, that can, no matter how much cash they have, no matter how little debt, there isn't a business in the world that can survive very long with zero revenue. It just doesn't work. You know,
Right.
it just doesn't work. The whole economy shuts down, which is why I don't think this will last very long. I think the maximum tolerance for this is 4 weeks. After 4 weeks, there will be such a surge of pent-up need to do stuff that people will say to hell with it. They'll just say to hell with it. They will just go out and do whatever they need to do. Curfews be damned. because you cannot put a lid on the entire economy. You cannot have government saying what is necessary and what isn't, and then expect it to work. We are not a centrally planned economy. We need every single business that in the world. We need them. And if anything has become clear, it is how extraordinarily fragile and interconnected the whole network of small, medium, tiny, independent businesses is that supports the entire way of life that we have. You cannot just shut them down and say everybody has to work from home, because we have, I know this is getting political now, because we have neglected to invest properly in a healthcare system that can cope with the fallout from something like this. And we need to get back to work very, very quickly. And people will go back to work, because the human spirit is such that it will not accept confinement and the inability to work and to provide for themselves for longer than about 4 weeks. And I think 4 weeks is the absolute maximum, because if the government hasn't come up with some way of mitigating this and moving across to a more sustainable way of managing this virus, then people will just ignore it.
Well, and we should mention that you are coming to us from right outside of Dublin, so across the big pond, and we're all feeling these similar effects. So from your perspective, as if you can just elaborate, while most of the audience here will be from the United States, I am pulling in on the worldwide network that I have and wanting to share this, but what similarities and differences are you seeing from where you are versus where I'm coming from?
Well, I don't think there are many, to be honest. I live in Ireland. I work in Germany. Germany's doing an amazing job of managing this. That has a lot to do with the way Germany prepared itself. Germany has had an institute called the Robert Koch Institute since 1995, whose only job or primary function was to connect all the pools of knowledge and expertise around epidemics and viral diseases and sort of threats to the healthcare of the nation. That's their job. So they've had a centralized research facility who does nothing other than connect all the various people in the country and globally working on these problems. That's number one. Number two, German. So that's been there for 1995. We're talking about the best part of 25 years. So they've had loads of time to build up expertise, and it's centralized so that there is a hub of knowledge. Second thing they have is Germany has a highly decentralized but connected healthcare system, which means that power to act has been devolved systemically throughout, down to individual towns and communities, which means there isn't this vast monolithic healthcare management system in the middle, as in the UK, that is slow to react, hugely inefficient in terms of delivery, and that has a great mismatch between sort of management and the doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals at the front. So Germany went into this with something like 28,000 ICUs, and Britain went in with 4,000. Germany went in with a bank of over, I think, 50,000 ventilating systems. The UK went in with well under 10,000. Ireland has 11,450 hospital beds for a population of 4.6 million, I think. And the maths is quite simple in Corona, and that's the reason that governments are so panicked, is because they say that there's a statistical probability of actually catching the disease, whether or not you show symptoms or not, it doesn't matter, but around about 60% of the population, 60% of the population will be touched by it. Now, in a country like Ireland, you can do the math, We have 4.6 million. So 5%, and if 60% are touched by it, it's going to be around about, I don't know, 2.6, and of that 5% are going to be seriously ill. So 5% of 6%, you're looking at 3% of the entire population, are going to be so seriously ill that they're going to need some form of hospitalization. Now, of them, only a very small percentage are actually going to succumb mortally to the effects. But even on a small country, that 3% of the entire population is far more than our hospital system can cope with. You multiply that, you just do the maths in every single country. They cannot cope, which is why they are so keen on flattening the curve, because that's the only way that we're going to have any chance of getting this under control if that 5% proves to be accurate, or the 3% of the entire population. So if the 60% are accurate and the 5% are accurate, then we will probably end up with a 0.2 to 0.5 morbidity rate. We've all become statistical experts in epidemiology over the last 2 weeks. But if that is the case, then the reason that they're doing this becomes obvious. The health system will just collapse. And that's without looking at all the people who've got other diseases, and our healthcare system was creaking under the weight of its own capacity overutilization before we even started this. We're just hopelessly underprepared. So governments have got so much on their hands, but our economy just can't cope with zero income. It just can't do it, which is why individuals need to be really up to speed on getting all the help that they can from the programs that are available, and spending the time. There's no point in running after customers because they're not going to come. It's worth spending that time reaching out to state and federal and local distributors of emergency funding just to tide you over. And there are all sorts of things happening. And what we do with all this money that's being created out of nowhere after the crisis, that's a completely different issue, and that will have to be dealt with politically. But it's not something that people need to concern themselves with now, because right now you just need to fill the fridge.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and we are all dealing with a new normal. You may hear my kids in the background, making breakfast and cleaning dishes, and we're on spring break. We've canceled our trip and we're here just hunkering down. Fortunately, we'll have a almost 60-degree Fahrenheit day today, so we'll hopefully get outside and enjoy some sunshine. And we're finding joy in the little things. And I want to end with a little more about the course that you just piloted, which was Entrepreneur as Investor, and explain a little bit about what that is and how your participants really benefited from that. And in using that mindset of being an investor in your business, how it starts to elevate and define the role of owner or founder or CEO, whatever title we may choose to take in our LLC or S Corp or incorporation. But truly investing and looking at this as an asset, because it gets back to what you said earlier, which is, I think you alluded to, we are not our business. We are a human on this earth who has created a business, and there are infinite possibilities through the kaleidoscope of life of how we can create this journey for ourselves. And to get through this, if we really look at this business as an asset, how does that change our thinking, our processes, our sense of ownership?
It's a really good question, and one that I feel uniquely qualified to answer.
I knew that you would.
The really interesting thing about every entrepreneur is, irrespective of what their background is, when you sign up for the job of business owner, even if you're just a solo, when I say just even if you are a solopreneur, in other words, if you're not taking responsibility for building a system that requires other people and an infrastructure, the role of entrepreneur, by its very definition, comes with with an embedded role that many people are just not aware of. And that is the role of capitalist and investor, allocator of capital. Because what you're doing as an investor, what you're doing as an entrepreneur, is you are marrying a flow of different energies. Now, these can be physical energies in the form of raw materials. They are metaphysical energies in the form of enthusiasm and contacts and networks and people who you are bringing together to solve some sort of problem. But one of the energies that is always part and parcel of the entrepreneurial process is capital. It has to come from somewhere, and it goes through and it comes back as something. And what I found is that this particular role of capitalist, of an actual manager of capital in the business, is the one that gets most ignored. Because business people don't think about it because it doesn't seem to be there in anything more than an abstract way in their day-to-day business. But it's there all the time. And I have found over the years that making that role visible and encouraging it and giving it some form of shape and process helps the entrepreneur to do what I think is probably the most important thing that he can do on his or her journey, and that is to remove themselves slowly but surely emotionally from the business, so that the business is not them. And the moment that the business isn't you, you are according to it an independence of existence. So it becomes an independent entity that requires treating independently of the individual who started it. And that's hugely freeing, because then you evolve in your role from the mother of something that was sort of born in you and is attached to you, to a nurturing role to see it grow up and leave the house and create a life of its own, so that you can go back to being, who you are, instead of having your identity completely tied up in the business itself. Now, some people are very happy having their identity interwoven with the business and are good at, separating those two things right up until the end of their lives. But mostly I've seen that there is a confusion between where I start and finish and where my business starts and finish. And that's unhealthy. And also, there's, make no bones about it, the business for most owners ought to be the single largest asset in their personal balance sheet. Next to their home, which, depending on how large the mortgage is, either belongs to you or the bank, the business is probably the single largest asset, or it ought to be. And if it isn't, and if there are no plans for it to be, then what you've got is a job.
Right.
And not really a business, because if you're out of it and it's not profitable, it's not compounding capital over time. In other words, if you're not keeping the profits in there, reinvesting there, it doesn't matter whether you're an LLC or not. Those are technical issues. But if the capital that you produce in the business is not being reinvested in some form to further the business, and it's being spent on taxes and upkeep, then you don't really have a business. Certainly not one that you can sell as an asset. So you need to make that distinction, and it's fine having a job. It really is. It's a noble thing to do. But by bringing in the perspective of the investor, the capitalist in your business, you give yourself the option of making more out of your business than just a job with liabilities.
That's great. And I'm really excited about the ebook that you published almost overnight, just in the last couple of weeks.
It was last Monday that I published it, and I think I started writing it on Friday morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was ready for distributing to a designer on Saturday morning, and it was back to me on Sunday night. So yes, it was quite fast.
Yeah,
but we have time.
Right, time, and there is a different kind of energy that comes from something like this. That, I mean, creativity comes from darkness. I really feel like when things shut down and we can take a step back, that's where innovation comes from. So I commend you on getting that done.
Thank you. Well, I've set myself the task of producing one a month.
Okay.
And I'm just working on the next one at the moment. And I wrote a blog post, which I published at lunchtime today, on the subject, which is how family systems and business systems are different, and how entrepreneurs and family business owners often make the tragic mistake of conflating the two, or even worse, applying the rules of the business system to their family and the rules of the family system to their business. And I've spent a little time examining that in the post, and I'll be publishing an ebook with a family business expert in 2 weeks' time to elaborate on that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we'll definitely have to do a follow-up conversation, possibly a recording on that. And I know that your website is a little under construction. You're reworking some things and working on your.
But it's up there, and you can visit it and at least look at the stuff that I'm writing about. It will be going through a metamorphosis over the next couple of weeks. But it will always be up and running and functioning, and so I'm delighted to invite anybody who is interested to come and sign up for my weekly newsletter, which the blogs post will be in, and some resources that I find that I think are interesting to share.
Great. And if anyone wants to download the ebook, they go to goodandprosper.com, and there is a quick little form. Just put your email address in and submit, and you'll be sent to the PDF, correct?
Thank God for MailChimp.
Yes, yeah.
My favorite monkey.
This is your favorite monkey. Not a paid advertisement, by the way. I'll have to go after them for some sponsorship. Well, thank you for joining me today. And again,
thank you.
If anybody needs to contact Sir Steven, you can certainly contact me. We'll put resources in the notes, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
This will end. All will be well. All manner of things will be well, and quite soon, I think.
Indeed. Thanks, Sir Steven.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.